Hi, welcome to another episode of Babes in Bookland. I'm your host, Alex Franca, and today it's kind of special for me because it's my friend and my cousin, Kimmy, is joining me to discuss Raising a Rare Girl by Heather Lanier. But before we get to the episode, here's a review from Sandy on Apple Podcasts. Having a podcast that discusses books that will make you question, realize, or reflect is always appreciated. A space where girlies can listen to those who share their opinion or introduce them to something new is something I will always support. So happy I found this podcast. Virtual cool clubs. Yay! Thanks, Sandy. We're so happy you found this podcast too. And you know what? I think this is going to be a good episode for some good reflections. Let's get to it. Hi, Kimmy.
Hi, Al.
This is so exciting that you're here. It is so good to see you on Zoom. We haven't been in the same place since our grandmother's funeral. And before that, it was many years. And we were like thick as thieves growing up.
I know. I hold on to those memories that they just keep you close for sure, no matter how far we are.
I completely agree. And it's just really special for me to have you here. So thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Okay. Raising a Rare Girl. What were your thoughts?
I thought it was amazing. I thought it was so powerful and also a mirror, honestly. And I had never really read a memoir like this. Just so, the first half of the book, I could relate to so much of it. At the very beginning and all the surprise and the adjustment and the grief that you go through. It was so palpable and so relatable. It was almost to look back, turn the clock back 10 years and to really remember myself in that spot.
Yeah, good. I was hoping that you would connect with it. Did you feel a little bit more seen, a little bit more understood than you did before you read the book?
Yeah, I sure did.
I thought that this memoir was incredibly moving and eye-opening. She marries her personal experience giving birth to and raising a daughter born with the very rare genetic disease, Wolf-Hirschhorn Syndrome, WHS is what we'll continue to call it throughout the episode. It's very rare. 1 in 50,000 children are born with it. And Heather writes that your odds of becoming a pro athlete are twice as good as your odds of having WHS. So just to really show you how rare it is. So it's a genetic disorder and it's caused by a deletion or missing piece of chromosome 4. And she's got all these cited excerpts from various articles and essays and books. And I always appreciate a good source. And she uses these to compel us to reflect on our own thoughts and feelings about rare-bodied people. That's the term that she uses to describe people with disabilities, physical or cognitive. She's so honest about her struggles with her guilt, her grief, like you mentioned, her envy, and implores us to rethink how we place value on human life. Should we only strive for a society full of perfection or normalcy, or should we love and accept people as they exist? And I feel like this is a very topical discussion. Really excited that we're getting into this today.
Me too. Super excited.
Let's do it. It was published in 2020, and this is Heather's dedication to J, F, and P, without whom I'd be stuck in a much smaller version of myself. Oh, I'm getting chills rereading that. When I first read that dedication, I was like, holy crap, that is such a beautiful way to describe any relationship coming into your life. But the change that I think we go through as mothers expands you. And I just love that, a much smaller version of myself. Heather, I fucking love that. Thank you. Okay, so we always start with some quick topics. Tell our listeners about you and about your kids, their ages, and tell them about why you connected so deeply with this book.
Well, I am a mother of 3. I have 3 kids, 14. My son is 13, and the little sister is 2.5. So the older 2 are in middle school and at that age where they're starting to think about what they want to do and who they want to be. And little sister is such a fun addition to the family dynamic, an intense personality since the very beginning.
And it's really cool because Kimmy and I are like a month and a half apart, and she was pregnant with her 3rd and I was pregnant with my 2nd, and they are kind of like a month and a half apart. So that is like really trippy how family is cyclical like that.
Yes, I love that. And I loved getting to see you during that time too, when we were growing them and getting to
Yeah.
spend that little bit of time together.
Yeah,
So
we were like checking in with each other and, all that fun stuff, which is just always good. So tell us about your eldest daughter, your 14-year-old.
my daughter is diagnosed with something called septo-optic dysplasia. SOD is what we refer to it. It's a rare congenital condition that affects the development of the brain and the eyes. And it's characterized by a combination of abnormalities that impact the optic nerves, the midline of the brain, and it can include the pituitary gland. Symptoms can range from vision problems, hormonal imbalances causing growth or developmental delays, seizures, motor difficulties, behavioral issues. Since it's a rare and complex disorder, hers is 1 in 10,000 births.
Wow.
The care of the individuals with SOD often requires a team of specialists, including pediatricians, endocrinologists, neurologists, ophthalmologists. Symptoms specific to my daughter is that she is completely blind in her right eye. She has reduced vision in her left eye. She's about 2,800, and she has a limited field of vision also in that left eye. So an MRI scan showed missing gray matter in the midline of her brain. She is diagnosed with autism spectrum sensory processing disorder. But she grows well. She's incredibly strong and healthy and thriving and adapting her vision to the world around her.
And I want to say she is turning into a fierce young woman because we asked if we could use her name and she said no. She drew a hard line there. And
Permission
I
denied.
respect that. And we will respect that. I love it. Okay, so we will learn more about my cousin Kimmy's beautiful family as we dive deeper into the episode. And for our next quick topic, in one section, Heather writes about how during a series of testing, a nurse is trying to find her daughter Fiona's urethra for a catheter. And Fiona is small. This is a symptom of her syndrome. And Fiona is screaming in pain as the nurse tries again and again. Heather writes, when the hairdresser's blow dryer is too hot, I don't tell her. When the dental hygienist pokes bloody patches into my gums, I don't relay discomfort. Be convenient. Don't let your pain become a problem for other people. I don't know exactly where I learned this, but it's an expectation plenty of women internalize. Yet at this moment, she writes that she yells at the nurse, get somebody else. Quote, mothering Fiona was turning me into a different kind of woman. How have your kids turned you into a different kind of woman?
I related to this moment in her story so intensely. Of course, our children change us. They teach us to be more patient and selfless, present. But mothering a child with disability cracks you wide open. Rearing children already blows through the illusion of control, but throw in a medical diagnosis and suddenly fear is always on your mind. Fear of the unknown, fear of the future, fear of the worst case scenario. It's an intense place to be. And I feel like my fight or flight mode was always on in those early days. Pleasantry and people pleasing can really go out the door when you're searching for medical answers and medical support for the quality of life for your child. I was young. I was just leaving a really combative childhood, and I was ready to fight whoever I needed to get what I needed for my child. So I related to that incredibly. If that person wasn't on for today, okay, next person, on to the next.
Thank you. Next.
We're getting this done. That's right.
The least painful way possible, for the children, for the babies.
Yeah, quality of life. That's right.
As we go deeper into the episode, we will continue to draw parallels between your experience and Heather's experience, those initial moments of discovery, fear. So let's get to it, okay?
I'm ready.
Heather writes about the various faiths and philosophies that she grew up with and continues to be curious about. And she reflects on how they have shaped her, the way that she moves through her life, the way that she views herself and the world around her. And I really loved reading all of her musings and was really struck by her ability to be curious about something without judgment.
I love the relationship that her husband had with religion. So much grace and so much, room and space to really care and support for her. I thought it was a beautiful, their relationship with religion in more so the searching to live an enlightened life. He saw so much enlightenment he was able to see that in his daughter.
Yeah.
I just thought that was beautiful. She kind of talks about, especially we get down into it soon, about her parents' belief. And I just think it kind of shows our short-sightedness as humans, that we limit our God to something that we can understand and we can explain away. Why are we given disabilities? Why we're given struggles? That every up and down is a petty punishment or a small gift from the divine. I think we're all our own main character.
There is something calming about this idea, right? That everything is out of your control. But then, what's the point? It's kind of how I feel about it, And I think I probably do talk about this, but I've always hated the sentiment when people are just like, well, God wouldn't give you more than you can handle. And it's like, well, but people die all the time of cancer.
All the time. Oh, I don't think that's how it works. Yeah, not at all. Not at all.
Her father, under his household, when she was younger, her parents were together, and under his household, she was a fundamentalist Christian. So that kind of means that her salvation hinged upon accepting Jesus into her heart. Also, her father was a horrible person. She writes about how he would watch her undress at night. Fortunately, her mother makes the very difficult decision in the community and faith part to divorce Heather's biological father. Heather feels relief from the chains of her Baptist upbringing. How was faith utilized and was it weaponized in your household?
Oh, weaponized, totally. They taught directly from the Bible. So I think a lot of fundamentalism there, a lot of, I can just remember, I mean, I spent a ton of time with my dad working and sitting in the truck. And this was the 90s where, I mean, we didn't have iPads or anything to keep us busy. It was just
Yeah.
hours long in that truck, days and listened to 90s country music. And when I was young, we went to church every Sunday and we went to, Bible study every Wednesday. But my parents yelled at each other the entire way to church and the entire way home from church, and every
Yeah.
day was a battle. And it very those gender roles were very much enforced. Yeah, I think they liked to present, this is the way it's supposed to be. But like everybody and anybody, they
Hmm.
fell short, constantly fell short. And I feel like it would have been a more realistic and a healthier upbringing to just admit those faults of we try, we try again, we try harder, we learn our lessons, we try to be good people, not, these are the rules and you broke them and you're a bad person, you
Yeah.
know? Yeah.
Yeah, being raised in that environment, it's confusing, right? Because you're being told one thing, but you're being shown another. And then you're being told, do as I say, not as I do. But yet you're soaking in so many things that aren't being said that I think a lot of us are just kind of like reflecting on a better way forward and feel a lot less guilt.
I don't feel guilty at all. I don't teach guilt to my children or use shame as a behavioral tactic.
Yeah. Okay, let's get back to Heather talking about healing some family lines. Great transition. Thanks, Kimmy. So her stepfather comes into her life and he heals a lot of things, but he also has some interesting beliefs. She writes, he believed in an invisible energy that entered into each of us and extended out to all of us. He believed our thoughts affected this energy, which then responded by giving us what we thought about. Our minds could shape our realities. Basically, quote, if you believe things badly enough, you can make them happen. So this was decades before The Secret became a phenomenon, right? She writes, my parents both subscribed to the philosophy, and parents, she recognizes her stepfather as her parent. So when she writes my parents, that's who we're talking about. My parents both subscribed to the philosophy that thoughts made things. Whatever you wanted, you could get by thinking positively. If you weren't getting what you wanted, you weren't being a good enough steward of your mind. But unfortunately, it gets really tricky. As Heather tells us, my parents' belief in the mind-body connection sometimes means that they unintentionally blamed me when I caught cold and flus. There's this book that she writes about her parents turning to, a guide for determining the mental causes of the physical ailments. She writes, if I developed a case of sinusitis, we went to the book. Sinus problems? Irritation to one person, someone close. Who was I annoyed with? I sometimes got bronchitis, lungs, depression, grief, not feeling worthy of living life fully. What was wrong? Was I depressed? If in my mother's former fundamental Christianity, sin was the cause of depression, then in our New Age religion, depression caused a sin of the body, illness. Both religions, I realize now, attempted to explain suffering by finding blame with the afflicted. And this is a big theme throughout Heather's book. Heather continues, you will find entries for coughs, cramps, and Crohn's. You will not, however, find an entry for chromosomal anomalies. Like I said earlier, her stepfather actually ends up dying of cancer. He does pursue a conventional treatment at first, but then he ends up going to a new naturopath. And while her stepfather's quote unquote woo-woo methods of positive thinking hadn't healed him. Heather once again breaks up with a belief system that she could no longer reconcile with. These ideas are triggered, though, much later when Heather is pregnant. She writes, the belief that I was entirely responsible for my wellness, only now I had my baby's wellness too. And we will get into that a little bit more. But first, let's talk about her husband, Justin. We brought him up earlier. She writes, in the two traditions he's loved, contemplative Christianity and Zen Buddhism, my husband has spent thousands of hours letting things go. How good are you at letting things go?
Oh my God, I feel like I'm not. Like I feel like I can be obsessive,
Yeah.
I'm better now, 14 years later, I think, at taking a breath between event and solution. When I was
Mhm.
young, a lot younger, it was very overwhelming of we needed an answer now, or we needed to figure this out as soon as possible. It was detrimental, to her future. And now I can take a step back. I know that we will do the work. I know that we will find the answer. I think the latest White Lotus, that finale, how it began with the Buddhists talking about how our quest for resolution in the unknown is the cause of our suffering. And ain't that the truth?
Yeah, no, it's true. And thank you for bringing such a wonderful pop culture reference to the show, White
I
Lotus.
loved them. I loved the Ratliff family. I could not get enough. It was so twisted.
So good. So in quite a few of the memoirs, Buddhism gets brought up, and Pema Chodron gets brought up. She's a Buddhist nun. I think it's such a lovely philosophy, religion. Seems like such a lovely way to live life. I'm Buddhist curious. If your son is Christian curious, I'm Buddhist curious, and
Oh,
I feel
always.
like I need to go down that path a little bit more. And yeah, I love things like White Lotus, kind of just bringing some of these ideas to the mainstream, maybe to certain people who would never get exposed to this idea
Exactly. Yeah.
before. I'm the same. I'm a Scorpio, which like I actually don't really subscribe to too much of like the
Libra
zodiac
rising.
stuff. Scorpios hold grudges. I do hold me some grudges. So I'm working on letting things go. You know what letting go right now? What my idea of success is and what my idea of a successful life is. That's something that I'm working on.
Wow. Yeah.
It's hard when you've
Oh, I can
thought of
imagine.
something one way for so long, you know?
Yep. I love that. No, to think about that. And the success of like, right, but mothers having it all. And if we are so highly successful in it's just pieces of the puzzle, right? Motherhood and in our career. And like, there's just, maybe we're 40% here and like 40% here. And it makes up this much of our life because there's not that much of us to go around. Right. And just highly successful in all of these areas. We have to share ourselves a little bit. I think that's hard.
It is hard. It's a constant weighing every day. Okay, so back to Heather. Right after Fiona's birth, Justin is ordained as an Episcopal priest. Their church was more progressive. It ordained women, married gay couples, didn't require celibacy, but it matched that traditional thing that he loved about Roman Catholicism. He saw this was his path forward. So throughout the memoir, Heather writes about the ways that Justin parallels his faith journey to their experiences. And you kind of brought that up too, how he just saw his daughter for who she was instead of like who the world seemed to like need her to be.
Yes. Yes. To talk about the perfect partner.
Yes, it was lovely to read about their relationship. And he just seems so at peace and grounded, offering a great shelter for Heather as she really struggles with her daughter's diagnosis and the little value that the world appears to put on her life. So we'll sprinkle in some of these moments as we discuss further. And I also love, she writes that he taught her again and again that, quote, laughter was a spiritual practice. What are your thoughts on that phrase? Because I loved that.
I love that so much. I believe that wholeheartedly. Like, I feel the closest to God when I'm with my nuclear family, when we're enjoying the sunshine in the backyard with a cold drink, or when we play music and cook meals together. I heard one time that a happy family is an early heaven. And that just really stuck with me. Is I can't, there are several times when I'm holding my clean baby, I'm rocking her to sleep, and I just think this is heaven. It's got to be.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's so true. All right, so let's talk about growing our babies. The pressure specifically to grow a super baby is what Heather writes about. And I love that she capitalized super baby. Heather writes about the various ways that she already felt pressure to do all the right things so that her baby would be perfect while she was pregnant. She gave up wheat. She writes that she's unsure why. She's just like, I remember giving that up. And I was like, oh, okay, I would not. I only ate bread towards the end of my
Oh,
pregnancy.
bagels. Oh, yeah. It was, yep, every day.
She only slept on her left side because it was better for her circulation and the babies. That one hit with me. Definitely, I tried very hard to only sleep on my left side. Heather writes about listening to Hypnobabies, a natural birthing program that guides you through self-hypnosis to have a pain-free, medicine-free birth to, quote, create the reality she wanted, which a pain-free birth and a perfect child was the reality she wanted. And remember, she has her old views of that mind-body connection. So she writes, I suspect my old views were activated largely by the culture of pregnancy itself. Once our pee contains enough HCP to make a plus sign on a stick, women are advised on every single lifestyle choice. And ain't that the truth? Okay, so you've had 3 babies. Have you had 3 pregnancies?
I've had 4, actually. I had an ectopic pregnancy in 2014.
I'm so sorry about your ectopic
It's
pregnancy.
okay.
Did you end up needing
I
surgery?
did. I had ultrasound that showed internal bleeding. I was in a lot of pain.
Oh
It
my
was on, so
God.
it was New Year's Eve, 2013, and I waited. I was in pain for like 2 days. I waited so that I didn't have to go to the ER, so that I could wait till the offices opened on Monday. So on the first,
That's kind of dangerous.
I mean, I didn't know what was going on. I thought it was a cyst. I thought I'd had a cyst
Oh, so you
before.
you hadn't tested positive for pregnancy.
No, no, I was not trying to be.
Okay.
I had an
Oh.
IUD. And that's, yeah. So they
Whoa.
say that there's an increased risk, and that's what happened. I had an IUD, and I totally did not expect to be pregnant, but I was in a lot of pain, and the ultrasound showed that not only was it an ectopic, but that I was internally bleeding.
Oh my
Yeah,
God.
so I rushed to the ER, and luckily this is a time where the laws weren't as restrictive. I cannot imagine going through it
Ugh.
now. I remember laying on the table being incredibly scared, asking the nurse, what am I looking at here? I had a 2-year old and a 4-year old at home.
Yeah.
They need me, and there's nothing scarier than these complications not sending me back home to them. So I
Yeah.
think the topic of abortion as healthcare. I mourned that potential child for about a week, because it wasn't
Yeah.
expected. It wasn't, not that they weren't wanted, but it was this little, what could have been. But I was so thankful to come back home to my babies, which was the
Yeah.
important thing. I was so
Yeah.
young when I had the first two.
Yeah. So tell us about those pregnancies, the difference between the first two. Like you said, you were young. What were you, 22 when you were pregnant with your eldest?
Yeah, I turned 22 when I had my eldest, and then 23 when I had her brother. So very young, back to back. And not only that, but we'd found out her diagnosis before the second one came. So I have a toddler and a baby. Pregnancies were all, I was very sick with my girl babies. I mean, threw up for 6+ months, had morning sickness throughout the entire time. I found it. I thought it was so interesting. With my son, it was the regular 6 to 12 weeks. You're kind of sick, and then you're moving on. It was much easier.
And were you really strict about what you ate? Did you avoid all the normal stuff?
Yes, I was young and healthy, and very thankful for that. Very thankful for very uncomplicated pregnancies.
Yeah. And then when you decided to have your third, this was a decade later. How was that different in your body?
I was viscerally reminded that how I carry girls. I was so, so
With the vomiting,
incredibly
you mean?
sick. Yes, yes, these girls that are trying me from the very first moment. It was wonderful. I definitely reappreciated it as, this could be my last time. I kind of got that chance to, back to back pregnancies when I was younger, you just kind of want to get through it. And then this one, I was able to slow down and really enjoy, that time with her, and with
Yeah.
our family of four transitioning into a family of five. That was a really sweet transition, bringing her into the dynamic.
That is so sweet. And speaking of sweet things, let's talk about Fiona, Heather's child. Her daughter was born in a warm hospital tub after 36 hours of labor. How were your birth experiences?
I love giving birth.
How's
I
that for you?
absolutely, just the whole, I mean, it's painful, the contractions, but I just find the whole process so incredibly magical. Like, there's nothing like those first moments with your baby. There's nothing like those first few days with your new baby. Birth is the most amazing thing I have ever experienced in my entire life.
Did you have medicine-free
Oh,
birth?
no, no.
Okay, good,
I
good.
was induced with
Okay,
all three kid babies. So I never
okay.
started contractions on my own. My body was never able to like cope with, those natural endorphins, and I was
Mm.
Pitocin all three of them.
Girl, me too. Well, I mean, my second was a C-section. I wonder if that's like a family genetic thing.
I wonder.
Wow, that's crazy.
My oldest birth experience was different than all of the rest of them. She was my first. I was very young. I don't think that my OB/GYN liked me very much.
Oh no.
Yes, I felt pretty judged by her for being such a young mother. And at the time, I had a boyfriend, but not, a husband. And
That's
I felt
shitty.
it was shitty. And now, now that I'm older, and even the next pregnancy, I would have allowed someone to treat me that way now. I would
Yeah.
have found another doctor. But this was all very just kind of done for me. My doctor was found for me. And it's just kind of
Yeah.
like, this is where you go. I didn't realize I had options, So the 36-week anatomy scan, she didn't do till 39 weeks. And I don't think she looked at it till 41 weeks, because I was brought in at 41 weeks after being told, oh, you'll just have to wait. And they were freaking out. She was huge. She was measuring gigantic. So they rushed me to the hospital, and all of my pregnancies it was about within 9 hours. From the time I went into the hospital to the time they were born was about 9 hours.
Okay.
My oldest ended up getting stuck and she had a shoulder dystocia,
Oh my
which when she
gosh.
came out, her arms were not moving. And so the doctors rushed her over. Normally they pat her down and they hand her to you. And no, they rushed her over to the side. And I'm hearing these doctors talk. They're calling in nurses and I'm asking what's wrong. And the nurse tells me, well, it's going to be okay. The doctor looks at me and goes, actually, she may have nerve damage in her shoulders and may never be able to move her arms.
What the
That's what she told
fuck?
me. I'm sitting there on the table, my first baby spread out on the table still. And she's like, actually, your kid may never be able to use their arms.
Just like that.
Just like
I'm
that.
like, oh my
And I
God.
was, my husband was leaning over me, check on me. And I was like, go to the baby, and go over there.
Yeah.
Instead of sending everything that I could to go check on her.
Have you left a terrible review for this
I
doctor
have thought about
online?
it over and you know what? I checked online because I was like, I should leave a review. And this was recently. This is now like 14 years later, and I'm still affected by it.
I
But I have
mean,
thought
I don't
so I
blame you.
looked, and about half the reviews are exactly what I would have said. Yes. So
Okay.
several of them are like, I felt judged by this person. I felt the
That's
care was, this
horrible.
and that, like
I'm
intense.
sorry.
Yeah.
Okay, and then so how crazy though to be told this thing and then that ends up not happening, right? But then something else ends up happening. We'll circle back to Heather and her birth experience with Fiona, but let's get into your daughter's diagnosis and how that happened because I feel like we're right there.
Something interesting that I do share with the author is that experience in the first couple pages where she talks about, her daughter was born and they were hovering over her, but when she was handed the baby, she was told something and along the lines of like she's perfect or she's perfectly normal and that was the last time someone would refer to her as perfect. That is something that I connected to very, very much because that is exactly what happened. I mean, this 9 pound, 10 ounce huge healthy baby girl given to me and told me that she's perfect, and while she is, it was a different feeling when 3 months later, we're finding out from a bunch of doctors, we're finding our diagnosis. My mother-in-law was actually the first person to come to me with those concerns. It being my first baby, I had no real timeline of, but she had brought up the fact that she wasn't tracking, she wasn't making eye contact, and that it might be time to get her checked out. I can remember just crying at that before we met the doctors, crying at what if she has autism, like that's the worst thing is,
Well, we've been sort of as a society conditioned to like be afraid of that instead of accepting that pretty much we're all on a spectrum
right.
of varying degrees. That's a very topical situation right now. And it makes me so angry for people who are diagnosed with autism and parents of children because there's absolutely nothing wrong with you.
No,
Absolutely
they're
nothing wrong
these
with you.
incredibly special individuals. I have learned so much with my daughter's neurodiversity of the way that she looks at the world, the way that she processes information. It's amazing. I find it's so beautiful. We're not as a society exposed to that. We're not taught to value those quirks because maybe they're not profitable. Maybe they're not.
That is easily conformed. I wonder if
Yeah.
that's it.
Oh yeah, there you go.
Yeah. Talk me through your mother-in-law brings you these concerns and you go to the doctor.
Yeah, we actually went to 3 doctors in 6 days.
Wow.
All ophthalmologists. So first it was just a regular ophthalmologist, and then it was a pediatric ophthalmologist, and then it was a low vision specialist ophthalmologist. We just kind of were handed down from each doctor ONH, optic nerve hypoplasia, which is what the ophthalmologist can actually see as the small optic nerves in the back of the eye. And little did I know, so ONH, optic nerve hypoplasia, is a part of a larger syndrome, septo-optic dysplasia, which she has. That includes, along with the small optic nerves, it can include the abnormalities in the brain. And we needed an MRI to show us that. So what struck me the most about the medical community was meeting all of these ophthalmologists, and getting this diagnosis, the last one especially, nobody made it clear to me that she needed further testing. Nobody made it clear to me that I needed to, ONH can be part of something bigger. I was given a diagnosis, and then you will what you want with that. And the last guy, who was the specialist, okay, he told me, he confirmed her ONH, casually dropped that she may need an MRI, and then started to talk about what he was doing for his chili cook-off that weekend. So I was being given this devastating news that I had no understanding of, and the doctor switched. I realized that's his everyday, but to a parent, of a 3-month-old.
Did you resonate with Heather's experience then with some of these doctors with
Oh
these
yeah.
terrible bedside manner?
Yes.
Which we'll get into a little bit more specifics of
And
that.
so you really started, I was kind of floored at that time. Not floored, but I was interested in my perception of what kind of doctor I wanted. I started to realize that I needed less of a floral or flowery approach. I really appreciated the doctors who were information based, who gave me as much information as possible in layman's terms. I didn't need the personal connections and stories. I needed information about my daughter. I needed help. We needed a way forward.
Yeah.
We saw more and more doctors. And after that, he had casually dropped septo-optic dysplasia. I went home and Googled it, just like Heather
Which,
did, just like,
yeah,
and,
yeah.
the spectrum that people with this diagnosis can be on. It can go from mild visual impairment and normal growth development to, severe developmental delay and seizures and pituitary glands not working to where you have to administer hormones, all throughout the day.
You just were in this place of like unknowing, like a limbo.
Yeah.
There was nobody there that was saying these are the next steps for you to take so that we can, narrow it down. Or was that just like, we have to just see what happens as your daughter grows? It's a wait and see situation.
Turned into that. I would have appreciated the ophthalmologist with ONH to have made it a little bit clear of the alternate syndromes and said, hey, you need to, now your next step is a neurologist and an endocrinologist. And these are your next go-tos. Like that is what I would have appreciated, because when we did see the endocrinologist, that came back normal. Her neurologist, mostly, her MRI showed some abnormalities on the midline of her brain and missing gray matter. And so when she was very young, we did not know what that was going to manifest itself as later in life, right? That's where a lot of the care went to. Okay, she's not in dire need. We'll see you every 6 months, or we'll see you every year. We'll keep an eye on this. So we did learn quickly with the first initial tests in the MRI that she was in a stable condition. That was comforting.
Yeah, your situation, it just is reminding me of Heather so much, where, like you said, she was given this baby, and she talks about the APGAR test, which is this test that all the babies, get within the first 5 minutes of being born. And it's this way of realizing how, quote unquote, good your newborn is, which is kind of crazy to think about, but you want that high APGAR score. You do. And her daughter Fiona scores at the 1 minute mark, it was an 8, and at the 5 minute mark, it was a 9. She writes APGAR called her normal, and it was the first and last time anyone would. As the morning wears on, Heather's given birth. She writes, it became clear that I needed to worry. Fiona was 4 pounds, 12 ounces, an alarming size for an infant born full term. Heather is really worried about the size of her daughter, and she's being made to feel worried about it. And she writes about the painstaking process of trying to get Fiona to latch and to feed her, and having to like pump on a hospital grade pump and squeezing out tiny drops of colostrum, thicker liquid, and then they suck you dry until your milk comes in. They're like these little vampires. That was my experience. First night, not so bad. Everybody kind of got to sleep. Second night, both of the babies were like, where's the milk? Where's the milk? Where's the
Oh,
milk?
I was Googling nipple shields at 2 a.m. I was like, I can't do this anymore. How am I supposed to do this anymore?
Help.
Night two. I ordered nipple shields overnight.
I love it. A doctor contemplates sending Fiona to the NICU, but then they decide they can wait on that. So Heather is just getting all of this like mixed information, brand new mom. You're in the thick of it. You're exhausted. She writes, a new nurse entered my room, someone who hadn't just seen me squeeze a person from my body without medication. And she asked me a question that felt like a slap. Mom, did you take any drugs while pregnant? No, nurse, I wanted to say. I took superfoods. I took Reiki. I took electronic accords and affirmations. And that really pissed me off. It's like, on one hand, I understand because it's not making sense to the medical team, right? This is a full-term baby and she's very small. The first thing that they need to figure out is if there was any drug use or what happened, during the pregnancy. But we're obviously reading this from Heather's perspective, so we know that everything, like she did everything she could plus more. And to be asked that, I can't even imagine the pain that would cause.
Sure. I mean, the sad reality is, there's just such a broad spectrum of things that happen, people that come into their services, sure. But I mean, I think there's a theme over and over again with people's experience with the medical community of how abrasive it can be, you know?
Yeah. And in some ways, it's like I get it because I think it takes a certain type of person to be able to be in that field, in a field where like horrible, horrible things happen every day. And like
Yeah.
you have to move forward, you have to disassociate in a way. But then it can be maybe easy to lose track of the fact that like these are people that you're
Yeah.
dealing with. They're not names on a
That's
chart.
right.
I've had really good success with doctors. I do tend to pick women. I don't know if that helps in my experience that they've listened more.
I think statistically that's a real thing. And I will say I was very surprised. My doctor was in Tuscany for a wedding when my daughter was due. She was
Okay.
leaving for Tuscany. So I was like, great, I'm supposed to have a baby that time. So while this woman, it was the same woman who delivered James 10 years earlier. So
Okay.
she's, this wonderful doctor. So she couldn't make it. So the doctor they called in, we had just done shift change, was a man. And I had never been to a male doctor before in my life. He was wonderful. I would have honestly he retired that about 3 months later. I would have switched doctors, quite frankly. He was amazing. He was caring. He came in. You could tell that he was experienced. He took a lot of care. Now, this was an incredibly fast, he was only in there for a very short amount of time, but the work that he did, I appreciated him very much.
Good. I love that. So while Heather is kind of having these experiences, like she's falling in love with her daughter, right? As most of us do when that little beautiful babe
Little angel.
is like passed over to you. The pediatrician comes in and that's who they need the all clear from before they can go. And Heather's ready to get out of there because she's tired of like feeling judged and is not feeling like a good situation for her anymore. And she writes that the pediatrician is suspicious and he looks at Fiona with displeasure, asking about the placenta. Quote, "If it's not the placenta," he said, "then it's the baby. You see, it's either bad seed or bad soil." She continues, "I wasn't so sleep deprived to lose the thread of his logic. I was the soil. My daughter was the seed. My daughter, according to his expert eyes, was a bad plant." I was so angry that the doctor said this. I mean, who the hell says this to anyone? I hated this for her.
I can imagine some of these things coming out of these doctors' mouths, right?
Just think about what you're saying. Okay, so they go home. Heather is still struggling to get Fiona to eat, but she doesn't want to turn to formula because she's been conditioned to believe that formula is bad. And she just feels like she's failing. She feels like she's failing as a mom already. She writes a lot about surrendering throughout the memoir. We've talked about letting go a little bit. She couples it with the idea that, quote, "every new beginning involves the dying of something, and every death precedes a birth." She writes, "A friend of ours, a priest and mediator, told us that after the birth of his first child, it took him months to let go of his old life and surrender to the demands of parenting. He didn't enjoy parenting until months into the gig, when he finally let go." We've talked about your eldest daughter. You had her on an unexpected timeline and these unexpected things come up. Did you feel like you had to surrender this idea of what you thought motherhood was? Or were you able to just kind of like go with the flow?
My timeline was unexpected and unconventional, but from the very first moment, it was nothing but healing for me. I found so much love and purpose and healing in motherhood in my own family. I got away from what I was raised with. And sure, we had plenty of struggle, but the love was real and we could get by on very little, just living on love kind of at that time.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. Heather writes, "I didn't know that in becoming a mother, my old worldview would get cast down, that much of what I thought mattered in life would grow old. I didn't know just how profoundly my life would be made new from this baby, and not in the usual a baby changes everything way. No, in a way that would toss my deepest hidden values upside down." So at this point, Heather is still very much trying to get Fiona to be, quote, normal. And she'll have to reckon with how the importance of being normal and its cousin, right/correct, in her life and in our society muddies the way that she can feel allowed to purely love her daughter. Months pass, and Fiona is not gaining weight like she should or reaching the standard baby developmental marks. Finally, a doctor suspects a syndrome. Fiona has wide-set eyes, a heart murmur, and a Y-shaped butt crease. Heather is so honest. She writes, "For a painful second that felt like free-falling, I wanted to hand my child to someone else. A mother is not supposed to have this thought. A lizard, maybe, but not a mom. The urge to hand my baby back was primal and pre-rational and brief. When Fiona was returned to me, she was nearly weightless, and yet now I held the weight of the world." You talked a little bit about grief earlier.
I think especially when you're given such an unexpected diagnosis, it completely erases every preconceived thought you had for your child, and you want everything for them, just if any normal child. And then all of these barriers are put up. It feels like, for when you get this diagnosis, it feels like your child is going to have to overcome so much in order just to live life the way that her peers are. And I'm not saying that that's a bad thing, and that you put in the work. That's what I've learned with this life, is you just put in the work. You go over those barriers. That's just your journey, right? Life isn't fair, but it doesn't make it any less. Also feel like, with my eldest has done so much work in her life on top of the regular expected work to get to where she is. She works incredibly hard. So the grief aspect of, in all parents of disabilities, I think there's a time where you're grieving the work, you're grieving the unknown, you're scared for your child. I can remember working at that time as a waitress, and there was a little playscape on the outside of our restaurant. And I wondered over and over again, would my child be able to play on the playscape? Would she run and play like with all the other kids? And come to find out, yes. Quite frankly, she's taught me over and over. I mean, you would think this little, mostly blind child would be scared, and she's never has been. She has always just barreled towards that playscape and figured it out. So that's been our life, and the grief and the fear has really just turned into like resilience and competence. I can't imagine. And Heather, this is where our journeys are different, is there was such an unknown in our spectrum, but it did get to a point where I knew that she was stable. I knew that it wasn't degenerative, that it was all work from here, but that everything was stable.
It wasn't limiting your daughter's life expectancy.
But before I knew those things for sure, that is a fear unlike any other that sticks with you for the rest of your life. It sticks with you that it's not good enough, that my child is the better spectrum, and that we are the lucky ones. But you become so vividly aware of the parents sitting next to you that are, and you get this
heightened compassion and empathy.
Heightened compassion, yeah, and community among these people of you want to fight for every child that needs a little bit more. They all deserve it. Yeah.
Yes, I completely agree with you. That's also a reason why I wanted to pick this book and talk about this, because I'm right there with you. I want to fight for your daughter, for Heather's daughter, for people I don't know. Back to Heather's journey. At this point, she doesn't have an exact diagnosis, but she goes down the rare syndrome rabbit hole and she reads horrifying things. She writes, "The internet had done what it does best, stirred up my fears into a strange froth that I no longer knew which was up and which fact was truth." Can I just say, like, the internet is really good at making us all be really afraid. So like we should all just like maybe take some breathers from the internet from time to time, no matter what you're looking up. You know what I mean? Okay, so she gets the diagnosis, Wolf-Hirschhorn, like I said, WHS. Now she has even more solid horrors to combat, like the mortality rate that is estimated at 34% in the first 2 years of life.
Scary.
It's so scary. And she writes about just crying, just emptying out, feeling so scared. And her husband tells her, if our time with her is limited, then I'm just going to make sure I love her the best I can every day. We need Justin to just write a book about Zen and the art of parenting.
Oh yeah, I would go to Justin's church.
Yes, Justin, yes. Heather writes about finding a community too, connecting with fellow WHS parents, but the horror stories that she will hear from them, especially when it comes to like the medical community, how doctors told them to leave their child at the hospital.
I audibly gasped at that. Audibly gasped when one of the therapists told her, you can put her in a home.
Yes, we're right about to get to all of those little examples. Luckily, Heather meets with this resident when they're at I believe they're at the neurologist's office. And he says, we won't put limits on her, okay? We'll help her be all she can be. Heather writes, the resident did a powerful thing that day. Through language and framing, he took my daughter's life back from a culture that might label her as less than and returned that life to us. Thank God she found some of those along the way.
Yes, there's a doctor that said the right thing. Isn't that life? It's life-changing to just say the right things.
Yes, she has bad experiences, but luckily, Heather also is able to get the much-needed therapy for Fiona early because she was diagnosed early. Heather comments how grateful she feels that Fiona was born in 2012, years after a federal law declared that kids like her deserved therapeutic support in 1986, when centuries ago, theologians Martin Luther and John Calvin suggested people like Fiona were possessed by evil spirits. So thank God we're all living in a more modern time. However, in her county in Ohio, they used a teaching model, which means that the the therapist didn't work with Fiona directly, but taught Heather what to do. So now she has to add occupational, physical, and speech therapists to her list of people to be for her daughter, all while being a mother, all while we really don't get into this too much in our discussion for this episode, but like she's pursuing a career as well, a career at writing. But like you, she's ready to do the work, right? Because she loves her daughter and she'll do whatever it takes. But at a certain point, there's only so much of you to go
Yes.
around.
Yes.
She writes, when I was having no fun as a new mom, I considered it the mark of bad mother. Good mothers reveled in the work, I thought. So did you ever experience this feeling? Were you ever pushed to this point where you were just like, this is a lot?
Yeah, I mean, that's part of that mom guilt on steroids. And throw in that I was 22 years old at this time. In those early years, I fought a tremendous amount of guilt for not being able to be everything for her. And you really don't know the questions to ask or the support to seek. That comes with time. And each specialist we saw, more recommendations for support were made. I learned over time that I cannot take over the role of everything that she needs. You know, you enter this journey of motherhood, and I didn't go to school to be a neurologist. I didn't go to school to be an endocrinologist. I didn't go to school to be an orientation and mobility specialist. I mean, I just was not physically capable of being all of these specialists for her. And what I realized that it's my job to be her advocate and her team lead. And it's my job to keep this team moving forward, everybody having their piece to that puzzle. That's where what I learned that my role as a mother would to be, because it is impossible for me to mentally take on. You would drive yourself nuts that I'm not enough. I'm solely not enough to give her the life that she needs. You know, you had to reach out. You had to ask for support. I was the squeaky wheel. I have learned in life, it is my motto that the squeaky wheel gets the grease. You know, as an advocate for your child, what you ask for, what your expectations are, and just letting her team know that you are there, you're active, and that you're serious about your progress. You know, you have to be on top of it as a special needs mom.
I love that. The squeaky wheel gets the grease. I mean, it's true. And especially and I think that's also a journey that Heather goes on. You know, we talked way at the beginning about how like she just wouldn't really say anything, right? Like I so resonated with her being like, yeah, when the hairdryer, I don't know if you've ever been to the salon and they're like on your ear for so long and you're like, it's okay, you're like, but like then through her love for her daughter found this inner strength and this inner power that I wish for all women.
Right. That bravery, those fucks go right out the door.
That's right. Advocate for yourself and the people you love for how little or how much they need it. You're worthy of taking up space in this world.
Yep.
But throughout all of this, Heather still really struggles with what she wants: Fiona to be an able-bodied baby. She would fantasize about searching the globe for the missing piece of her fourth chromosome. And she realizes she has to let this go, specifically via this sermon by Mother Jackie. So like I said, Justin's church is very progressive. And so there are female priests and they call them mothers instead of fathers, which I think is fantastic. I loved it. And Heather realizes, quote, I had to die some version of myself, the desperate, clinging, distraught version who wanted what her child was not. It's difficult for her because Fiona has her first seizure when she's young because she has a fever. And we already talked about how, you know, they go to neurologists and they're able to get this rescue medicine. But Heather has to learn about all the different types of seizures and how to administer the medicine correctly because like her daughter's life could literally be at stake. And it's like when the stakes are that high and all the while she's still a part of her just wishing that she could change her reality.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's a big thing is like she just needed to accept it, but also feel permission to accept it. I feel like that was a huge part of her memoir for me too.
She dealt with the outside influence of she realized the world was telling her these things, right? Like realizations of, oh, I do hold these biases, and oh, what is this grief for this person, you know? Yeah, I think definitely defeating our own societal conditioning towards this, because she knew, I mean, right away, there's no going back. You love these little people and with every part of your being. And that is a really tough thing.
I think it almost was like she didn't really need Fiona to be quote unquote normal. She just wanted her to be loved. And she felt like the only way for her to be loved was for her to have this quote unquote normal value.
Yes, the world, you want the world to see their worth, right? Of you see all of this worth and all of this wonder, and you wonder if I wasn't here, would the world love you the way that you deserve? And it's heartbreaking to think, no, actually, they wouldn't.
Yeah, she writes this. How did I ever learn that people like my daughter were less than? Had the roots of my thinking been planted by the defect language? She talks about, people using the R word and things like that. She writes, had they begun in the hallways of that elementary school I attended? Not quite. The roots of my thinking were older than me. The roots dug deep into history's soil, reaching even past the story of Jesus' disciples, who found a blind man on the side of the road and asked their master, who sinned to make this man blind? The man or his parents? Disability as punishment, disability as sin, disability as problem, as outcast, as other. These equations have been graffitied all over human history. I work really hard to cater my vocabulary to what is not only correct, but is like what that community wants to be labeled as.
Respectful, yeah.
And truly, it's absolutely no skin off my back at all. None. But when she wrote that passage, I was like, oh my gosh, it's so much deeper than just us casually dropping those words in elementary school, like she says, like we really have like disability as punishment, disability as sin. The Bible, like my mind was blown because I was like, these are the things that you don't even realize, the biases that are created. And you just kind of learn to think this way and that way. And then all of a sudden it happens to you. You're the mother of a child with a disability, and you have to fight for their value and their worth and their place in this world to be loved.
They're saying like all lives matter. Like, do they?
Yeah.
Do they when it comes down to it?
Ask yourself
if
that.
That's your slogan. Who are you overlooking in this conversation? Who are you devaluing?
Thank you for bringing that up. That's a great point. Heather writes, I have never heard what I wanted to hear, which was, oh, genetic condition? My nephew had a genetic condition and he couldn't walk or talk or feed himself. And you know what? He's awesome. A great man. If I heard that, Heather writes, I would have burst into tears of gratitude. And I wanted to include that because I think people, they want to say the right thing. I do. I think people come from a good place, but it's like, I love that she gave us this example of just like, don't try to fix it. Don't say, oh, they turned out fine. Like, just acknowledge that my daughter is beautiful and wonderful as she is. And that's enough. But Heather confesses she's still envied. She writes, here's what I wonder now. What did I long for? A baby who could do this or that thing, or a baby who was fully accepted by the world? I suspect the two longings were near equal, inseparable, conjoined. I wanted a baby who did all the things babies did, and I wanted a baby who was valued equal to typical children. If I'd lived in a world where babies like mine weren't called bad seeds or denied life-changing surgeries, I know my yearning for an able-bodied child wouldn't have nagged me quite so badly.
I feel like my daughter is accepted in the world. I feel like she and other people in the disabled community are overlooked. The support and the work that it actually took to get her to where she is today on a really promising path to be a happy and productive member of society. It was intentional and it wasn't cheap. She is more expensive to educate. She requires adaptation and equipment to be able to be included successfully with her peers. Her diagnosis doesn't mean that she's not worth the investment. We currently have an administration in office that wants to eliminate the Department of Education, wants to eliminate diversity, equity, and inclusion in almost every aspect of our society, all of which provide funding, research, protection, opportunities, and training for children and folks with disabilities in the classroom and in the workplace. I feel like people want to vote for politicians without having to actually look at the realities of the cuts that they're advocating for and who exactly they're leaving out of the conversation. When we turn people into just a number on a spreadsheet, you said this earlier, when we turn people just into a number on a spreadsheet, you really eliminate the humanity of each living person and what quality of life means for disabled folk and their loved ones.
Damn, babe, mic drop. That was beautiful. Thank you. That's exactly right. And at the very least, I just hope that today's episode invites these questions in our listeners' lives. I think that's what Heather wishes for her memoir as well. She talks so much more about finding a community. I talked about that a little bit earlier. She goes to a conference where she meets other children who have the same genetic condition as Fiona. But now I really want to get into the ways that her community was able to prop her and Fiona up. I said that she lived in Ohio at one point. She moves to Vermont, and these Vermont therapists are absolutely incredible. Their family moves to Vermont. Justin is offered a position in a church, and if they can stretch it, they can manage it on his single income because Heather has had to put Fiona's needs and what she is for Fiona on the forefront and her career goals on the back burner for now. Obviously, she writes this book, so we know that it comes back around. And to their delight, they have the most excellent free therapies for Fiona, and they come directly to her home. And unlike the therapists in Ohio, they respond to Fiona with joy and encouragement, not disdain. And these therapists have lofty goals for Fiona, and they believed that she could reach them, like chewing things. Most people with WHS cannot chew, walking. In Vermont, Fiona has more therapeutic hours in 1 week than she had in a month in
Isn't that
Ohio.
incredible? In Vermont, shout out to my man Bernie. Of course they do. They take care of their people, don't they?
Yeah, they do. Later in the memoir, these Vermont therapists will recommend an app to help Fiona find language so she can communicate her wants and desires as she is working on her verbal skills. Because Heather writes, communication is a human right. This is called ACC, Augmentative and Alternative Communication. After much deliberation on what is best for Fiona, they find this app. She gets this iPad for free from Vermont's flexible family funding. I mean, Vermont really sounds like a place to be.
Mm-hmm.
Fiona ultimately learns how to use it and communicate what she wants or needs. Heather writes about working with Fiona to give her a basic yes, a way for Fiona to have agency and independence in her choices. She wants so hard, and I think that's a big thing too, independence,
Oh,
right?
yeah.
Giving your daughter the gift of independence. Talk me through the journey that you've had to take so that your daughter could have this more independent, supported life. I know you guys used to live in a small town, and I think one of the reasons why you moved from that small town was to give your daughter more opportunity. So take me through that story.
Yes. So we moved back to our small hometown, and I thought that my ability to be more involved with the school and just understanding and knowing more people in it was going to give us the best relationship there. But what I quickly understood, and these teachers and women who tried their very best, but they were lacking the experience necessary, maybe seeing one visually impaired child in the years of schooling, so, and we were also sharing a specialist with like three other rural districts. So we would get access to our specialists 1 day a week, and so we definitely made the decision. And the therapies, we quickly understood that had sensory processing disorder, and the therapists in the small town were not trained to deal with that. So, we went looking and luckily had the means to move to an area for the schooling and for the specialists that we needed. Every specialist we sought out kind of had a recommendation that kept moving us down the road. We did a couple conferences where we met parents with kids who were also visually impaired, and that was something cool. We have a group of VI kids that I've watched get older with my daughter.
Mm-hmm.
And they were so cute when they were young to see them side by side with their little glasses and their little canes and very similar quirks to each other. It's the cutest. So while we never really developed a tribe, we were involved and surrounded ourselves in a world where people understood our experiences and our struggles better.
That's fantastic. Have you already started to see a shift in like the decrease of funding and has that played out?
We luckily personally haven't. Now we do see it in the districts. We have seen it in the last couple of years. We moved to this district because a district out of the Austin school district, because of Austin's continued failures and under servicing of its special needs, its special education population. And that's budget cuts. We live in a state that is underfunding our schools repeatedly. And that is where we have seen the most lack. And luckily, with our therapists and supports, but these are delayed evaluations. These are kids, they could just, because of these budget shortfalls, we can't hire the specialists and enough support people. Children are being delayed for their evaluations sometimes by years. And those are full school years of these children sitting in and not getting the specialty work they need to be fully inclusive with their peers. We have seen that. Now, I will say my daughter has been very vocal of her fear of the future and their fear in what these budget cuts mean for her. You can say all day that IDEA, the Individuals with Disability Education Act, is still enacted. We get rid of these departments, but these federal laws are still in place. Who enforces these laws? Who, when there's a state violation, who do we turn to when there's no more Department of Education? Who do we turn to for our civil rights to be reestablished? I mean, it's absolutely crazy. State to state, kind of, you already see some of those shortfalls because we do live in a Republican state, that the ripple effect from the federal funding hasn't made big impacts. But I am worried. We just enrolled my daughter in the Texas Workforce Commission, where they help her with training and placement in different areas of jobs. This is for her to be a more productive member of society, right? And every day I wonder, isn't this DEI? Isn't this the definition of diversity, equity, and inclusion? I mean, how is this a bad thing when it is helping her to be a more productive member of society, this inclusion work?
How is it a bad thing? I don't understand why we're trying to narrow our scope of what good is. It feels like we're taking 5,000 steps
It does,
back.
doesn't it?
And it was interesting to me in Heather's memoir, which was just from a few years ago, but like when she had been living in Ohio versus Vermont. And you just are kind of like you said, don't you want to help encourage these individuals to be as productive members of society as possible? Isn't that like the ultimate end goal?
Right. For a capitalist society, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
80% of the visually impaired community is unemployed because we have
Wow.
been lacking so much in our support and inclusion for these individuals into the workplace in our ableist society. I was going to say, you had asked me earlier about the supports that she needed to get to this point. She has a visual instructor that helps her and her teachers include her into everyday class. She has an orientation and mobility specialist who helps her learn how to navigate the world around her, use her white cane, how to cross streets, how to grocery shop, how to plan, for travel, how to use public transportation. When we finally got moved to the city, she attended therapy 4 times a week for 5 years. Like Heather said that they got by on Justin's income. That her to be there for her, running her back and forth to these meetings, dealing with the government with her health care was a full-time job. I can count on like both of my hands the amount of time that a clerical error stalled our healthcare support, and we had to pay for her therapies out of pocket. I mean, her therapies were $1,600 a month. That's $20,000 a year in therapy costs, and she needs these therapies for her quality of life for the future. Where we are now is not possible for the vigorous therapy work that we did for years and years in her elementary school.
To really simplify it for people who maybe don't get it, it's like going to the gym, right? You go once a week. How strong are you getting? You go 4 or 5 times a week, you're going to get strong really fast, right?
That was a great analogy. Yeah.
People might not understand, like, if you're doing the therapy once a week, that should be enough. It's not.
It's not.
There's just so many people out there with so many vast experiences that when you really want to create a society and a world that's better for them, which is what the United States of America is supposed to be, what are the basic rights that we have, indoctrined on our Constitution? How can you do that when you don't listen to these stories and have people like you who understand it, who have lived it, talk about policy and talk about real changes?
We are starting as a society or with this administration of the life is black and white, right? This is how it is. This should be simple, and it should be, this is how I've lived my life. And when has that ever been a reality for the world? Where has that ever been a reality, a black and white existence? It's never. We exist in the shades of gray.
It's honestly when you're a child, you think everything's black and white, and then you grow up and you realize that it's not. I love having this discussion with you. Let's get back to Heather. She and Justin decide to have a second child. So she balances pregnancy, quote, with the crappy, unglamorous task of what some call special needs parenting, filling out forms, calling insurance, driving to various specialists, long hospital appointments. You brought all this up. And she also balances this pregnancy with, quote, a mammoth fear. My fear partially eclipsed the beam of love I'd hoped to emanate for this new human. It's hard to love a stranger, harder still to love that stranger through a rainstorm of what ifs. What if you too contain an anomaly? What if you are sick? What if you teeter on the edge of mortality? What if you break my heart? Ugh. How old was your eldest when you got pregnant with your son?
Yeah, just 7 months. Yeah, so they're 16 months apart. So looking back at it now, it's crazy. It is crazy. I mean, and it has worked its way self out. They've had each other their whole lives. But come on, man.
Yeah.
What were our parents probably thinking when we were like, well,
hey guys,
not only do we have this small, beautiful little, visually impaired baby, but we're having another one.
Did you have any of that fear? Your eldest daughter's condition is genetic?
No, I don't think so. I think it's just random and it's happening. Yeah. And visual impairment, they've said that this diagnosis is happening on epidemic proportions. It's happening more and more that children are being born with this diagnosis.
Okay.
Yeah.
So did that thought ever cross your mind, like when you were pregnant with your son, like, I need to prepare myself?
Like, of course we had a little bit of that. But I think it was more so just in the thick of it. I think that we did an extra scan on his brain, and brain works like that. I feel like my first doctor with my eldest had been a little bit more interested, and not that it would have changed anything except for maybe preparation. And they probably could have picked up on some of this from some of the ultrasounds, some of the abnormalities. studies.
interesting.
Yeah. I
Okay.
mean, they say that like being a special needs parent is like going on vacation, that you're told that you're going to Maui. So you pack your swimsuit and, you brush up on your scuba diving skills and you bring your suntan lotion. And when you land, it turns out that you arrived in like Siberia. And so not only, are you utterly unprepared, but, you didn't pack for this, you didn't prepare for this. So one surprise like that is enough for a lifetime. And I've come to value any and all chances to plan and prepare. And I understand, I've learned that you have to let go of control, but it feels like you've learned to let go of control by taking control where I can. Does that make any sense?
That makes so much sense. And you're talking to somebody who loves to be in control. So I'm with you. Knowledge is
Yeah.
power. And education is empowering. And as long as you do it right, don't go down those Google rabbit holes.
I did my research. Yeah. A little,
Yeah.
let's watch ourselves with
Yeah.
that.
But I do think that knowledge is power. And any time that you can just be a little bit more prepared for something in life. But again, balancing it with letting go and realizing
Yeah.
that you can't always be prepared.
Yeah. Oh, and like and Heather deciding not to do the test because it could have been dangerous for her child. Like I respect that so much. I wouldn't have risked it either.
Yeah, she was really debating getting the amnio done with her second. And that is such a moving passage too, because she really takes you through it. I mean, she's sitting there and like the nurse doctor comes in and they're like, "Are you ready? Do you want to do it?" And she's like, "No, we're not ready." Like we're thinking because she's trying to just figure out like, who am I doing this
Yeah.
for? Am I doing it for me or am I doing it for the baby? And ultimately, she decides that it wasn't worth the risk. That's right. Okay, so I thought that this was pretty cool. Her second daughter is born without any genetic anomalies, and they decide to name her Petra, a name that just popped into Heather's mind, and it just felt right, right? Like she's like, Petra. So her water ends up breaking on what she later realizes is Saint Petronilla's Day, Peter, Petra. She has no idea when they name her daughter Petra, and then when she Googles like interesting things that happen on her daughter's birth, like this pops up and she's like, "Oh my God, it's so cool." And the crazy thing is that Saint Petronilla's expertise, she's the saint invoked against the very thing that triggers Fiona's seizures, fever. And her seizures, I feel like we didn't get into it as much, and I don't mean to downplay it because it is a very terrifying thing that they are constantly having to monitor Fiona. A fever causes a seizure, and these seizures can be they can be
That's scary.
life-threatening.
Yeah.
Yeah, so scary. So I don't mean to downplay that at all. And that's why this is such a crazy cool coincidence. Out of the 10,000 saints, they pick Saint Petra, and she's the patron saint against fever. So it's just like so beautiful. She writes, "I had 1 foot in the land of rare and 1 foot in the land of normal. I was grateful to my girls for letting me hold dual citizenship. I could let both kids be themselves." The last section of the memoir is a couple years flash forward. Heather has a new job in the English department. Fiona's in preschool, later in kindergarten. And Heather writes about how scary it was to send Fiona to school for the first time. And she makes the video for the teachers so that they can know their daughter. And Fiona isn't overwhelmed at all at preschool. In fact, she's like a little mini celebrity and everyone loves her and everyone says hi. And she talks about how Fiona like air kisses them all. And I can just like picture her.
So precious.
Fiona is ultimately able to chew, to walk on her own. She speaks so many words. She can hike half a mile uphill. She's attempting to cross-country ski, and she enters kindergarten with confidence. And Heather writes it just about being so impressed with Fiona's elementary school, working with her to discuss how a kid like Fiona can be included. She writes about how she gets to sit down with teachers and staff and emerge a plan for confidence. And she knows that this isn't a universal experience for many families. She writes about the Act of Congress in 1975 that guaranteed all disabled students with the right to a, quote, free and appropriate public education, but that even, quote, when President Ford signed it into law, he predicted this bill promises more than the federal government can deliver. Now, even that promise has a risk of having even more failure. In her epilogue, Heather writes, "When I first started researching Fiona syndrome online, parent after parent offered versions of 'Your child will teach you not to take the little things for granted.' Through the phantom chunk of Fiona's missing fourth chromosome, I've gotten to see that we all, every day, take the miraculous for granted. I will repeat forever and ever, my daughter doesn't exist to teach me things. Her reasons for being on this planet are as mysterious as the reasons any of us find ourselves here in these particular bodies. Among 3 trillion trees, Fiona, with her broad grin, has brought me again and again back to awe. I know.
Yeah.
It's beautiful.
Yeah.
I hope you're proud of yourself. Growing up with you, you've always been a go-getter. You've always been that person who never shied away from hard work, whether it was like pitching 1,000 pitches every night so you could be the best pitcher in the old. You have poured so much love into your daughter and into your son and into your third. You have built a beautiful family and you have paved a beautiful path forward for all of your children. I think you've built a beautiful life for yourself.
Thank you. Thank you. I feel it when her therapists, they're giving out compliments for her work ethic and then turning and saying, and that's because of you, Mom. That's because of you. And I couldn't, there's nothing better that you could say to me than that is, she has this advocacy for herself, this determination that she was born with, but that we've set up to, she just plows forward in a very confident way. I'm glad to say that's who we are for sure. This memoir she writes, I mean, I couldn't put into words more perfectly in the way that how beautifully she writes about her experience with her daughter. It's beautiful.
It is beautiful. And I feel like ultimately this memoir is advocacy to implore us, the readers, to reframe how we think about people with disabilities. She quotes this essay by Leonard J. Davis, Constructing Normalcy. He writes, "The problem is not the person with disabilities. The problem is the way that normalcy is constructed to create the problem of the disabled person." Heather brings it back to a religious context, quoting the beginning of Genesis. "In the beginning, God made everything. And after God makes each thing, the Bible says God saw it was good." She writes, "No matter how you read the Bible as history or fiction or poetry or myth, no matter whether you believe it's the inspired word of some higher power or just another human-made tome, the writers of that first page want to tell us something. When we perceive with the lenses of the divine, we see goodness." That's all she wants, for us to look at her daughter and see the goodness and the light and the joy that she is. And I just love this book. And I love you. Thank you so much for chatting about this with me today. Raising a Rare Girl by Heather Lanier. And thank you so much for telling me about your experience and just giving me your heart tonight. I really appreciated it.
I love you so much.
Bye.
Bye.
Thanks for listening to Babes in Bookland. To access the full version of this episode, you can subscribe on Apple Podcasts or support us on Patreon. Visit babesinbookland.com for more information.